Let's begin by just taking a look at how we can start to create some simple materials and apply them to our geometry. So if you are following along with your own project, then you can go ahead and start with the model that you have. Otherwise, you can load up 30 begin in your project files, and this is the one we'll go with from this point forward. So right now there are no materials on here. You do see down here in our materials manager that we do have some materials. That is a carryover from the landing platform that we have, but I've gone ahead and turned off the visibility. So you can see a bunch of different surfaces here previewed on these little thumbnails, and we'll take a look at how we can start to create some of these as we go through this process. So we want to start to add some surface quality to the different parts of this model. Right now they all look like they have exactly the same surface quality, and then we also want to add things like maybe fabric for the seat, or maybe along the tubes we want to add some different materials in here. And so what we can do is go ahead and start to create new materials. So in order to create a new material, we're simply going to go to create and then new material, or we can just double click here, the materials manager, and you can see here we have a new material. It's just a white shaded ball, as you can see here. With that material selected, you can see over here in our attributes manager, we have the ability to come in and change different aspects of our material. What I usually like to do though is double click on the material to bring up the material editor. And here you can tell what channels are actually being shown on this particular material. So right now we have color, which we are, you can go ahead and hit that, and you can see that you can define a color. So if I change the value here in the RGB, I can choose the color. Okay, I can also choose the brightness of that color, or I can input a texture. Okay, so it's using the color. It's also using the specular. So we have diffuse color here, and then we also have the specularity, which is defining sort of the shininess. Okay, we have under the specular, we have the ability to change it from plastic to more of a metal look, or a colored spec. Okay, and then we also have the ability to modify the spec. So you can see here by this graph, I can kind of tighten it up by changing the width. And then if I increase the height, it'll make it brighter. So typically, we want to have, for something really shiny, we want to have a nice sharp spec. This is kind of a fake of reflectivity. So a specular highlight is really the reflection of the light source. So if we don't have reflectivity on, then using specularity kind of helps fake the shininess. So if it's something is really, really glossy, you can see you have a really bright, really small speck. If something is more of a matte, then you're going to have a really wide speck that is very low. So you can see you can start to get more of a dull finish. Okay, so that's how you can set your specularity. If you want to turn any of these other ones on, you can go ahead and click the check mark. You can see with transparency that I can change the amount of transparency here. And if I turn that check mark off, it's not using that anymore. If you want something that's glowing, you could do luminance. Okay, and we'll look at some of these a little bit later on. But now that we have a material created, we can go ahead and change some of these to fit with what we want. So we'll call this something like body matte. And then we can decide how we want this to look. So we want it to be fairly shiny, and so we'll decrease our spec. And let's actually go ahead and add some reflection to it. So we'll go ahead and turn on reflection. Now with this reflection at 100%, you can see it's like a mirrored ball, which is not really what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and dial down the brightness until maybe halfway, 40% or so. You can see the difference here. So it gives it more of a reflective look. If you wanted to change the color, you can do that. It's kind of a light gray right now, which is I think what we want. Maybe darken it up just a little bit. Okay, and now we need to actually assign it to our geometry. So to assign materials, we can simply grab the material and hover over whatever object we want to actually add it to. So in this case, we can hover over the wings. Now you can see the material has been changed on the wings. If I go ahead and select the wings themselves, come in here, you can see that a material tag has been added. So you can see here's a material tag. You can see the ones with X's are for materials that we don't have in our scene anymore. Okay, but you can see here that we have a material tag. Just get rid of some of these on our wing base geometry. Okay, so that's how you can tell what material is assigned to what part of your model. Okay, we could go ahead and add it to the whole thing, and that'll, you can see, go down the hierarchy and apply that material to everything, or you can simply have it applied here. Okay, so we can do it that way. We could also just drag it straight to the objects manager. So if we wanted to come in and make the pivot, or actually let's make the center, and you can move those tags around very easily. So that assignment is really quick and easy to do. Okay, do the same thing for maybe the rim pieces. Okay, and maybe also just the plain rim. And so you can just decide, what objects you want to actually add this to. All right, so we'll go ahead and add it to the pieces of the fan. Let's add it to the center of the fan here. And maybe the body of this capsule here. Start to add it to some of these pieces here. Select this piece. And you can see I've got a couple of odd materials here. So we'll go ahead and add that to the base. Get rid of that extra one. And go ahead and add it to these. Now, in some cases, we can go ahead and add materials to different sections. So let's go ahead and add this white material to the yoke and the control panel. So in this case, we don't want this yoke to be entirely made of this same material. We want to actually have a different material for part of this. And so you can actually use tags to do that. Let's go ahead and, before we do that, we'll create another material. And let's go ahead and double click on this one. Let's call this, I'll move this over so you can see it. We'll call this seat material. Now let's just look at how we can change some things. So we had the body material that we created. So for this one, we want to do something a little bit different. So we'll click on the color, and I'm just going to go ahead and make something like this, kind of a teal kind of a color. And I want this to be sort of upholstered fabric. So for the specular, I'm going to go ahead and widen up the spec, and I'm going to take it down a little bit. Okay, so it's not going to be as shiny as something that is made of metal, and it's not really not going to be very reflective either. So I can go in and add that. Now if that's a little bit too bright, you can always come into the color and make sure you select your color channel here. Go into the color, and I can take down the saturation if I want to. Okay, and then I can maybe make it a little bit darker. So we might end up with something close to that. Okay, so you can see the surface quality there. And if you render, and we're not really going to be talking about rendering yet, but you can always go in here and do a quick render. You can get kind of a better view of it if you want to. All right, so like I said, there may be instances where we want to apply materials to different parts of the same piece of geometry. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can utilize tags in the next lesson to assign materials to different polygons. So we'll go ahead and do that next.